Hi everyone. I am Danelli. I'm here to talk a little bit about storytelling. Um, why storytelling? It's a great question. I think, in the age of artificial intelligence these days, the art of storytelling is becoming more and more important as time goes by for a number of different reasons. I think we're going to start seeing the need for the human touch, the human story that like helps us connect with each other. And I think, it's important that we bring up the role in artificial intelligence in this because I think that storytelling is a skill that's going to differentiate, for example, a hireable candidate and someone who is highly qualified. Um, And that differentiation is going to become more and more important as jobs become more impacted with well-qualified applicants. And I think storytelling is going to be the superpower of the near future. We're starting to see that like revolution with technology happening, where like technology is becoming more and more efficient. I don't think that it's going to replace humans because humans have the innate capacity to like look at things and determine nuance and but the story is going to become an integral part of that. um yeah, so technology is slowly taking over our lives through digitalization, artificial intelligence, advanced software. Our every waking moment is now dictated by how much cell phone battery we have and, our like work optimization apps and all of these other software. It's these, all of this other technology that's being advanced to help us do certain types of tasks. And storytelling is becoming an increasingly underrated skill to create human connection. Um, we uh, we always seem to find meaning in storytelling, and it's the place where we can find meaning is in storytelling and myth telling, in connecting. Um, it's a huge, investment of our time to tell someone a story, but it's a valuable investment and one that actually can have a quantifiable monetary reward and like price tag attached to it. And I'm not just talking about, being able to find a job. I'm talking about being able to write an email, being able to um, write a story, write a novel, write a script, write so many important things that require an element of storytelling. It's one of the reasons why we still enjoy going to the movies, for example. Um, in interviews, everybody has gotten that age-old question. So, can you tell me about yourself? And that particular question requires an answer in the form of a story, right? Um, the interviewer is looking for you to tell the beginning, middle, and present of your life story. And how did you become qualified to do this job? What is your education? Things like that. Um, so I want to follow up with, another kind of example also is maybe through relationships. We all get that question like on a first date or on an awkward date. Um, like tell me about yourself. Can you tell me about your life or something along those lines? And learning even some of the basics of storytelling goes a long way in those like high stakes social situations. Um, and I know what a lot of people must be thinking. you know. But everyone can tell a story. It's just something that we know how to do instinctively. No, I've taught at so many community colleges and universities in Southern California with, a wide range of demographics of students, ranging from very young to much older students. And I've also taught and substituted at K through 12. And one of the things that always strikes me is how people really still yearn for storytelling and knowing how to communicate and like connect in that way. And not everyone can tell a good story. Some people feel very shy. Some people, um, they drop the ball on like the sequence of events, and it takes some effort for a lot of people. There are some people that are great storytellers, just naturally, instinctively, but more often than not, the people that are natural storytellers will generally have some kind of background where they've started telling stories or jokes or connecting with individuals through conversation very, very early on in their life. So they were, narrating these stories very early in their life, and they've been practicing throughout their entire life and getting better. So they know how to carry a story arc. And carrying a story arc is super, super important. Like I just mentioned, you have to have your beginning, have your rising action, your most climactic moment, and then kind of resolve the issue if there is an issue. Tell the moral to your story. It has to kind of go through a little bit of a full circle moment. And the other aspect about storytelling is that you have to be able to tell the story arc through your own, like using your own voice, right? Use your voice to your advantage. Use your body language through it while you're telling the story to your advantage. Um, we a lot of times people miss out on that. They think, have to just tell the perfect joke and like the perfect punchline. But a lot of the work is through your voice. A lot of the work is through your body language and your linguistic inflections. Whether you yourself smile at a point in the story allows someone else to connect and maybe even gives them the permission to smile along with you. And if you maybe laugh at a joke that you're telling, it allows people to not take that comment or that moment so seriously, and it allows them to laugh. And the opposite is true, right? We all have had those awkward moments where the person didn't laugh. They were really like deadpan, and you didn't know if it was a joke or if it was a serious comment, and then everything goes politically incorrect. So yeah, you have to make like strategic use of your body language, of your voice, of yourself when you're telling a story. And then, I tell my students and I tell people this all the time, like, well, yeah, that's all great and everything, but how do you really tell a story? Like they're really skeptical, like, but no, how do you really tell a story? And whenever I hear this question, like I kind of understand that the person wants a step by step on like how to tell a story. And there really isn't one. Aside from find a place to start, give a few moments of like struggle and give your story like a climactic moment. Um, One of the methods that you could use to get you started is using the journalist questions. Um, and like the journalist questions are who, what, when, where, and why, or how. So those are beginner words that will help you draft a question in your mind or on a literal piece of paper to get you started on how to start a story, right? Provide a statement or a question, and then use that as your hook to get started using the journalist questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. Like I said, you have to have your like rising action. And generally, the format that I keep referring to is called the hero's journey, where you get started, you have your rising action, your problems that arise along the way, along your journey. And this is a very traditional format of telling a story where eventually, you come across several obstacles and you figure out how to resolve them. You, um, you like become your own hero, or you battle it through, or you apply some critical thinking skills, or you work as a team. And this is also a great format to use for interviews, by the way, if you're answering any question, is to kind of provide those moments of like doubt where you thought maybe I'm not going to get to the next step in this like task or whatnot. You had that obstacle that you overcame. You either worked alone to figure it out, applied some critical thinking, or you worked as a team. But the stakes get higher and higher, right? Like the rising action is creating a sense of like anxiety, or a sense of like drama. And then you get to like the climatic moment, um, where like literally you think this is it. This cannot possibly get any worse. It is as the worst it's gonna get. And then it gets even worse, even when you feel like I can't overcome this. And in the hero's journey, you actually do you manage to overcome the obstacle. Um, and at the end, after the most dramatic moment is over, you have your denouement, which is like the resolution of the story. Um, you kind of tell how things unfold after that moment, and you answer some of the last questions, or you give a moral to the story. Um, and generally, like in the hero's journey, you would call this something along the lines of, um, it gets resolved by human efforts, or by the hand of God, what you would call the Deus ex machina plot device, where things kind of just suddenly start falling into place and resolving themselves. And, this is where the law of affirmation starts to appear, and like positive things start to happen. Um, at sometimes at the end of like a hero's journey, like I said, it's just a good moral, a good lesson. Um, and other times it's just a great punchline, the punchline to a great joke. And and then you kind of give your listener the next steps. So now that I just mentioned um, listening, what is the role of listening in storytelling? People always get thrown off when I tell them like storytelling, any kind of communication is like a two-way street. Writing is a two-way street. In order to be a better writer, you have to write and you have to read a lot. In order to be a good storyteller, you have to tell a lot of stories, but you also have to be a good listener. It is so, so key to be able to be a good listener and to listen attentively to what the story someone is telling you. Um, Forget about grammar, forget about like the perfect sentences, or, you know, um, having perfect vocabulary. That is not the most important part. It is important when you're writing. I could create a different video for that, but grammar is supposed to help you convey ideas in a more clear way through writing. It is not necessarily critical when you're storytelling verbally. So I just want to highlight that the distinction be, between those two things. But listening is like the way that you understand what is being conveyed. And so you have to practice listening to capture the details, but also um, to like figure out what resonates with the person that you're trying to tell a story to, and the person that's telling you a story. So listening is a great skill in order to be a good storyteller or a better storyteller. Um, and so like, well, how can you tell that a story resonates with someone while you're listening to the story or while you're telling the story? With either like that potential date or that potential employer or the stranger that you're just meeting or networking with and you want to be friends with. How can you tell if it's resonating? So again, make sure you're listening for attention to detail and make sure you're giving attention to detail, like giving details that are important to the story that you think might be interesting to the person that you're telling the story to. Um, Another thing is if a person is telling you a story, you want to listen for values, right? You want to listen for what is important to that person, what is a value, not just what's entertaining and funny, but what is a value that they're conveying through their story. And that's something that, again, a two-way street. You want to make sure that you're including that in one way or another into your story. So, again, just to summarize a little bit and to re-emphasize the importance of listening, which is incredibly, incredibly crucial, and people really underestimate this quite a lot, is listening. One of the reasons why it's so important is because um, in order to have an audience that wants to listen to your story, you need to apply good listening skills yourself to another person's story. Um, it conveys that you care about what they have to say. And make sure at the end that you are asking great questions. Make sure you ask great questions. Make sure that you ask questions that show that you were paying attention to the story and what was being conveyed. Lastly, when you're telling a story, make sure that your story is coherent, right? It needs to be coherent. What do I mean by that? It needs to make sense. Um, I used to work in law for a long time, and I listened to a lot of people's stories whenever they had an accident or they got injured somehow. And believe it or not, one of the ways that some people just lost their case, even though their case was really strong, was because they um, ended up somehow conveying a story that sounded either to a judge or jury incoherent. It didn't make sense. There were gaps that could not be covered through a reasonable answer. And that like really, really affected our client's ability to win their case in the end. And that is super critical either also when you're like meeting people for the first time, when you're interviewing with someone, when you're networking, your stories need to make sense. They also need to be like, you cannot be gaslighting people and you cannot be like using cognitive dissonance in your stories because that really puts people off. So they need to make sense. They need to be coherent. They need to be logical and follow like a reasonable pattern. Um, Needs to be applied to your stories. People hate misleading stories. They really, 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 um, you know, the person with strong boundaries that you want to connect with and network with will often have really strong boundaries. And so they generally will be put off by misleading stories. And the last thing, be comfortable with your imperfections. It is something that a lot of people struggle with when they're conveying a narrative of some sort. They feel like it needs to be perfect the first time. I can't stumble, I can't mumble, I can't, yes, try to be clear. However, like, not everyone is the perfect speaker right from the very beginning. For example, um, I myself still need to practice slowing down, being able to convey an idea or thought without stuttering. It is something that I've struggled with since I was very, very young. And I will often think a mile a minute, but my mouth is still trying to catch up. So I need to back up and like slow down, breathe through the sentence. And um, it's something that I consider an imperfection, but I need to work on being comfortable with that. And um, I encourage a lot of my students to also apply the same similar methods, right? To like slow down and be okay and work through your imperfections. Um, so yeah, that's something to practice. Um, what is the last thing that I want to make sure I mention? Um, I think that's it. I think that is it for today. Um, yeah, so I think I want to highlight one final thing. It's a quote by Pablo Picasso that I just absolutely love because I'm a storyteller, because I love to um like connect through conversation. And I think it is one of the most like fascinating skills and like personal traits that a person can have is just to be able to be a great storyteller. And the quote is this by Pablo Picasso: learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. Storytelling is an art. Yes, you can learn like tips and tricks on how to get better, but it is an art. And over time, if you practice, you will get much better at it and it'll just come naturally to you to be able to convey a story. But yes, learn the rules like a pro so that you can break them like an artist. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, share, comment. If you have any questions, make sure to put them in the comment section. I would love to get inspiration on any future videos that you guys would like to see. A lot of this information is information that I apply myself and that I share with my own students consistently when I'm in the classroom. So I welcome any comments or questions, things that you guys were curious about or that you would like a more nuanced answer to. Because yeah, sometimes we have those very like particular questions. So that's it for today. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.